Do you hear thousands of voices chanting your name when no one is around? Does the sound of brushing skulls calm your nerves? If so, prepare to enter to Tales from Ophidian Games Podcast. In the Ophidian arenas, anything goes. Gladiators will come at you with fearsome eyes and giant worms, attack you with armies of the Need Dimension, creatures that exist only in your mind, and heartless robots. They will scorch the sky to blind you, turn your own friends against you. They will move so fast that your bodies will blur as they encircle you and close in for the win. They will hit and bend the rules in their favor. What will you do? Take control of your own destiny within the Ophidian universe and join the revolution. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Hugo Ferreira and welcome to the first episode of Tales from Ophidian Games Podcast. Ophidian is dead. Long live Ophidian. If you know me personally, you probably know how I feel since the last time that I read those words. Ophidian is dead. Long live Ophidian. Back on April 28th from 2020. Those words were said by Jason Robinett regarding the hack and slash games losing the license to continue to publish Ophidian 2360 products. In the middle of the last Ophidian Kickstarted, Ophidian Arenas. Well, those words meant that all the work that Jason and I were doing regarding the Ophidian storylines and lore will be lost forever. And that made me frustrated as hell. And I'm still am frustrated with the fact that my game was once again dead, even though hack and slash games reskinned the Ophidian Arena set into a brand new universe called OphidianUniverse to me. And even though I still helped a little bit on lower parts, it will not be the same. And my collaboration with hack and slash games faded to black. Well, let's get to today. 2 years have passed since Ophidian met died, and more than 3 years since the last printed product. But I'm still not done with this IP, even though I became super frustrated with it. After quite some time thinking if I should make a podcast regarding the Ophidian universe, mostly due to being afraid that the factor of me not being a native English speaking person, you probably already figured that out, would interfere with the passing of the matches that I want to do here. Eh, I set my fears aside and started planning for it on my spare time. Hey, let's see how this goes. And while I'm trying to fill in the gaps to write this episode, that made me enter in a wild memory lane. You see, it was April 5th, 21 years ago, that Greg, Rafi, and Sean, three high school friends from Queens, New York, had a dream to bring change to the gaming industry they loved by submitting to Ophidian real-time card game patent to the approval by the United States Patent and Trademark Office, USPTO, that is a federal agency responsible for granting US patents and registering US trademarks. And then, on April 29 of 2003, it was finally approved, and with it, the start of the creation of the best customizable card game ever created, Ophidian 2350 CCE. At the time of creation, of what later became Ophidian 2050, the CCG industry was dominated by the big three: Magic, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Pokemon. There were a number of independent companies holding on, mainly releasing licensed titles, but Greg, Rafi, and Sean had no history in the business, no contact, and little more than a couple $1,000 between them. So they contacted publisher after publisher, trying to find someone willing to give them a shot. Let's remember that Ophidium existed in a time without Facebook, Twitter, major blogs, digital distribution, YouTube, Kickstarters, hey, even these podcasts that I'm doing now, making finding a publisher their only real option. Then, after rejections from nearly every player in game, and shortly after receiving the patent approval, they got a meeting with the heads of Fear Trading Cards to finally shoot a game. As the meetings approached, their demonstration game wasn't right. At the last moment, while sitting in a pizza joint, drowning their sorrows in hot dog and melted cheese, Sean got the idea to add multiple gladiators to the game as a focus for the other characters. And by the time the last slice was done, they had a demonstration, which they were pretty happy with it. Nervous from the pressure, they started the demonstration, and things then started to relax until the demonstration was over, as the head of the family in charge of Fleer said, "Do it again." The problem, they only prepared for one single demonstration, but in the end they trusted the cards. Sokolov played again without any script possible, and after sweating out for what seemed like hours in a room filled with clear card memorabilia and history, they shook hands and gave themselves a publisher. Of course, the three of them, they knew they couldn't possibly do such massive undertaking alone, and were extremely fortunate to connect with Carl Van Husren, Kevin Coleman, Jason Robinette, and others. They all responded to an ad looking for playtesters and became valuable members of the team. Ophidian 2350 allowed them to take risks, to create a new property, try new mechanisms, and innovate. They were all gamers, so they pushed by gamers for gamers approach to everything they did. Most important, they wanted to make something both fun and deep, and that's what they did. As by the end of August, or at the middle of November, across the ocean, in a little seaside country called Portugal, the 24 years old me was reading his favorite magazine at the time. Yes, the 24 years old me grabbed all card games magazines that I could find here in Portugal. You see, at the time, without internet and all the things that we have today, those things were extremely complicated to access where I live, to say at least. And the magazines would more than often come with the delay of a month, sometimes even more, but often a month. But I really didn't care for that, as I devoured them with ease. The Scry issue, the July magazine, had an article from an upcoming game that left me with a wow feeling, almost as that game was something that I've waited my entire life for. It features aliens, robots, demons posing as gladiators in an intergalactic arena. I was hooked. even before having the game in my hands. But we'll talk about that in a few moments. Moving on. After reading that issue, I ran to call multiple gaming stores that I had at that time here in Lisbon to see if they could get the game. And guess what? Not even one at the time. And at the time, we had at least 10 venues in my neighborhood knew about it, nor they were interested, as their main focus here in Portugal was Magic, Warlords, and Pokemon. Anything else was a risk to order. Well, I didn't give up. I continued purchasing them almost every week until a new article came in Scry, now the review of the game, and one which gave it 5 stars on gameplay. Yes, Ophidian was the only 5 stars gameplay that Scry gave to a game in 2003, but even that wasn't enough to get their attention. So I did what a 24 years old teen do. As soon as I managed myself to get some access to internet, I contacted Ophidian Inc. to see if they would ship to Portugal. I don't remember how that ended, but probably the shipping was way too expensive and made me give up to a point. As I continued going to the Ophidian website every time that I grabbed an internet access point, and in December, Rafi made a writing contest. I entered and I won. The prize was having my story published on a site. But for me, that was much more. As I might not being able to get access to the cards, but I would surely would have access to the universe. So I started making fictions in forums, and I finally made one that was so acclaimed that they fully integrated in the official lore at the time. Remember, we were on a time that I was still starting to write fiction and I was still uncovering this wonderful Ophidian universe. You see, Ophidian 2350 CCG game was released in August 2003 and things were looking very promising. The game was put then the game was put on hold by Fleer only 3 months after the release, and Castle in another two, leaving the now nearly finished first expansion permanently on hold. Looking back, well, there were a few reasons why. Although Fleer wanted the game to succeed, they weren't willing to give the time that it needed. New concepts, new properties don't blast sales records at release, but they grow over time. Additionally, Ophidian Inc. faced legal intimidation and strong arms tactics from a competitor whose patent dominates the industry. Starting just a few days after the game release to the public. So, between the efforts to launch the game, the legal intimidation, and the fact that Fear was in serious financial trouble before the game was even released, making them to give in to the various pressures and put Ophidian 2350 and everything we had worked into deep freeze. Ultimately, it was a sad day for everyone because so much work from so many people had gone into the game and all that was planned to come after. And thus, February 4th, 2004, Ophidian was dead. His first death, at least. I started my volunteer work for Ophidian Inc. Uh, completely sheltered from the mess that was happening behind the scenes. At the end of 2003, managing gold defend material that was submitted from fictions to sets. One day I received a thank you package from Ophidian Wing with a thank you note from Rafi, a two-player introduction deck, plus a deck and a box of boosters inside. Well, damn, I almost cried. Okay, I actually cried, but never mind about that. Moving on. So, finally, it came in my hands. From that unexpected gift, I managed to collect a full set and made some decks that I still have and play today. Unfortunately, in the end of 2005, middle 2006, life interfered and I placed my games aside. And even though we managed to put together and release 5 new digital exclusive expansion sets under the moniker of Ophidian Stories and Ophidian Compendium to add to the base set card pool, that was indeed the second death of Ophidian. And Ophidian stayed that way until I discovered Facebook back in 2009, when under the bait painter of Chronex House of Cards, Cards, as in April 11, I started developing the first spin-off Ophidian brand, the Ophidian 2355 RPG Facebook game, which I managed to release to the public on December 20 of that same year. Unfortunately, 1 year later, on December 15 of 2010, I closed Cocards as the engine that was behind the Ophidian 2355 RPG application shut down a couple of months before, making that the third death of Ophidian. Simultaneously, on my 5th of 2009, Carl created Small Cave Games and started developing the Ophidian Wars, the Legend of Killflame video game for Xbox. During that time, Small Cave Games managed to release Ophidian Wars, Opac's Journey video game exclusive to Xbox 360 on July 19 of 2010. But 1 year later, I created the Justich Fan Productions by merging the materials that I created under the Chronox House of Cards and Ophidian Stories Companion to develop the OphidianUniverse print and play game. And I actually even released 2 demo decks and a Easter special card for the OphidianUniverse PPG print and play game on April 14 of 2011. Moving on, Ophidian Wars: The Legends of Killflame unfortunately never managed to be completed by a multitude of issues and was officially cancelled on March 1, 2014. And even though 1 month later, on June 6th of 2014, my Justich Fan Productions launched limited print of the pen and paper Get with the Flow, a role-play game that was based on Ophidian 2355. I did not have the means at the time to mass promote it and release it to a larger public, making it dead on arrival, meaning the fourth Ophidian death. And then on January 5th, 2015, I got an email from Ophidian Collective, and to my surprise, we talked for hours, back and forward emailings, speaking how to revive a game that had so many deaths already. Next day, it became official. Small Cave Games returned to the fray, and I helped Color with lore to create an updated Ophidian Wars brand. And then on June 4th of that same year, Ophidian Wars Core Set was released to the public. This new game was and is a light version of Ophidian 2350, but unfortunately it wasn't it isn't compatible with neither the base sets for Ophidian 2350 nor the 5 digital release that I've made back in the day, even though the Ophidian Wars game was highly rated, it didn't manage to get to the larger public, nor to the original players. And trying to get that larger audience that Ophidian Collective granted the license to Robert, Jason, and Chris from Hack and Slack Games. And although we could keep releasing Ophidian Wars products, we choose not to avoid confusion on the fans, making this the fifth Ophidian death. Hack and Slack Games fast forward the Ophidian setting into the year 2360, adding new characters, events, and even space systems to an already huge universe. And to help with consolidating the storylines and lore, I was invited to help and started as a volunteer consultant job at Hack and Slash Games. And during the course of my time, I wrote almost 80 new biographies for characters. Most of them, unfortunately, uh, didn't get a card release, mostly due to Hack and Slash Games only managed to release one set of Ophidian 2360 Survival of the Fittest, two mini expansions, the Ophidian 2360 People Champion and the Ophidian 2360 Promo Pack 3 Hostile Takeovers, plus a handful promotional cards while holding the license. And after the license was gone, well, you guessed it, the sixth Ophidian death. But will it be the final death? Maybe, as is it's been almost 3 years without any new printed card release. But maybe not. And to uncover that, you will need to be here for our next episode where I will talk about the Ophidian future. And for those that work together on Ophidian from the start, designers, artists, writers, testers, you all know that there's nothing like its science. Ophidian is a place where people who loved games could come together and do amazing things. It was the type of opportunity that only comes once in a lifetime. Collectively, we became a brotherhood. Even though we now have families in full-time jobs and live in different places, we still hear the roar of the crowds telling us to open the games once again, to step back into arena once again. Thank you for listening. I am Hugo Ferreira. And you, do you hear the roar of the crowds?